Hi everyone, it's Kate here. I just wanted to do a quick video for all you interior designers out there. So today I'm just going to talk quickly about what regulations and legislation you should be considering in your business. You may or may not have heard of the CDM regulations. That's the Construction Design and Management Regulations, and they have been around since 2015 now, so you should hopefully have heard of them, and if you haven't, then you need to pay attention, because this piece of legislation is definitely something that needs to be on your radar as an interior designer. The other piece of legislation that has come into force, or an amended version of it has come into force recently, is the Building Safety Act. That's another piece of legislation that you really need to be thinking about in your business, especially if you're working on those larger projects that require building regulations. So I'm just going to talk to you briefly about those two pieces of legislation, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because it can be quite complex. So CDM Regs, they are the regulations that deal with how a project is dealt with in terms of the health and safety of the project. So this starts from when you first create your design, and that's why interior designers have a duty to make sure that the project and their design is in line with health and safety. So that is from obviously the initial concept right through to when the project finishes, and your involvement is key, and what you do is very important. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you do need to be considering the CDM regulations, because under those regulations, as a designer, if there's more than one contractor working on the project, so if there's a builder and a plumber, a builder and an electrician, a carpenter and an electrician, then more than one contractor means there has to be a principal designer on the project. And that principal designer is normally, unless something else has happened which instruct somebody else as the principal designer, is you as the designer of the concept of the design and working with the client on the project. Even if you're not there for the whole project, just meaning that you've created that concept, that design, will mean you by default are the principal designer if nobody else is appointed. Something you really need to consider. And if you don't want to be a principal designer, then you need to take steps to make sure you step away from the project in a way that ensures that the client understands their obligations. This is obviously very different in terms of a residential project compared to a commercial project. However, you have to consider it in both residential and commercial. It's definitely something you need to be aware of and familiar with, and how you can minimise your liability by stepping back from a project if you don't want to take on that role of principal designer. Building Safety Act, I'm not going to talk about too much, because that is something that is quite a lot more complex. All I will say is that as an interior designer, unless you have a very good understanding of building regulations, you really don't want to be taking on that role of principal designer under the Building Safety Act. Now, just to make it clear, your role as a principal designer under the CDM regulations are very different to your role as a principal designer under the Building Safety Act. They are completely separate, and you could be one or the other or both, but we would not recommend as an interior designer that isn't used to working on projects and having a very, very good understanding of building regulations that you take on the role of principal designer under the Building Safety Act. If you want to know more about why, then we can talk to you about it. You can speak to us, drop us an email. We'll be happy to set up a virtual consultation with you so that you understand your obligations and are clear about both different duty holders under the different pieces of legislation. But it's definitely something you need to consider, both in your contracts with clients and also the steps you take during the project and from that creation of your design. So yeah, as I said, our contract templates that we sell on our website have consideration for both of these pieces of legislation, and if you are unclear about your obligations, then contact us and we'll be happy to talk you through it. Okay, thank you, bye bye.